How's everybody doing tonight? Good, good, good. This night is a little bit different, but that's okay. And tonight's message, maybe I should use this, huh? That'll save my voice. Maybe tonight's message is going to be a little bit different. Tonight, oh, there we are. Hey, yo. Danny's messing around. Hello. That was a lot of kickback. Anyway, tonight is going to be a little bit different of a message. Number one, it's geared towards men. It's also going to be a little bit different because I'm not going to use as much scripture as I normally do. I literally wrote 3 sermons in trying to prepare for this message, and had a lot of things that came at me, came together, but I think it's important for us to come to an understanding of what it means to be a godly man. And so tonight I've titled the sermon, What Does Being a Godly Man Look Like? And while I am going to touch on a few points of Scripture and a few passages in Scripture, I hope to give you guys a lot of practical advice and hopefully some very helpful advice on what being a godly man looks like. I wrote the first draft of this sermon on Monday. I had spent a couple of weeks researching it and planning it and figuring out what was going to happen. And I did what any good son does, is you go to a mentor or somebody who can give you advice on things. And I ran some ideas by my dad. And my dad, wanting to help and be there, says, have you ever read this book called Samson Syndrome? And I said, no. And he goes, you need to read it. And he ruined everything in a very, very, very good way. Most of what I'm getting tonight is and can be found in this book right here. I read it for the first time on Tuesday. I wish I would have had this book 20 years ago in my life. It is one that and there's going to be another book later on. It is one that I highly encourage you guys to go out, find, and get it. It's on Audible. It's on Amazon, and it'll be fantastic. I'll have it up here. And what the writer does, Mark Atterbury, is he uses Samson's story. One that most of us know, how Samson was a strong man. He had to take a Nazirite vow. He chased women. He killed a lion. He killed 1,000 dudes with the jawbone of a donkey. Killed 30 men over a bet with his first wife. Left her. Dated around. Met this girl named Delilah, right? And then she turns on him, and the rest is history. He gets his eyes poked out, breaks the temple, brings down a bunch of Philistines. And he uses that story to show us how a strong man can fail, and how we as men individually oftentimes think we are more capable than we are because of our pride, because of our bravado, all of those types of things, but yet we are all susceptible to failing. And he has 12 different chapters in 12 different areas where Samson fell, whether it's disregarding boundaries, struggling with lust, using anger as a tool, repeating mistakes, foolish risks, struggling with intimacy. He goes through all 12 of these. That wasn't all of them, there's more. He goes through all of them, and he identifies these problems and where they popped up in Samson's life. And then he shows us how to identify them and then how to overcome them as a man. And so it's a very helpful book and can help you deal with a lot of things. And so I kind of wrote another sermon about this book and trying to get all of this information packed in. And I said, there's too much information. And the point of tonight is not to tell you what not to do, but it's to tell you what to do. What does it look like to be a godly man? So I scrapped that one and I kind of combined the two, and I came up with the message that you're going to have tonight. But I do want to warn you, it's going to be longer than normal. but I think it's going to be important. And I've cut and I've cut and I've cut, and I think I've cut everything that I possibly could. But I hope everything that is said tonight will bless you guys and will help you in your journey of becoming a godly man. The three areas we're going to look at tonight is these three things. A godly man does not do it on his own. A godly man leads with integrity and discernment. And a godly man loves his wife. And some of you may be sitting there and thinking, I don't have a wife. Why are you telling me how to love my wife? Because here's the truth, and this is a failure in our culture today. You do have a wife, you just don't have her yet. And if you don't learn to love her and you let other women replace her in your life, it's going to make that relationship so much more difficult because you let other women take her place in your life because you weren't willing to be patient and wait for your wife. So you need to start loving your wife today. All right, and we're going to talk about that. That'll be the last thing. It's probably where we'll spend the majority of our time tonight. But the reason I think this is so important is to teach you guys things is because our culture is flooding us with the wrong image of what it means to be a man. Whether you watch TV or cartoons or movies that show deadbeat dads, missing fathers, they're either not there or they're useless. And the wife beats up on them, the kids make fun of them, they demasculinize men. Or whether it's, the movie stars, the athletes, the playboys, the Andrew Tates of the world. By the way, Samson was the original Andrew Tate. If you want to go back, I was going to go through the whole story of Samson tonight. I didn't. You go look at the story of Samson and you look at how Andrew Tate lives his life. 2 peas in a pod. All right. But anyway, I digress. We look at social media and that's the way that our culture has. It's like almost two extremes. It's either you're useless or you're not there, or you're this misogynistic man who just runs around sleeping with anybody who you can. And so we've got these two extremes, and no one teaches us that either of those is wrong, and no one teaches us what it looks like to have the right relationship. And because of this, they have begun demasculinizing men in our culture. And they have created this idea that men need to be put in a closet and we'll just deal with it ourselves. But here's the problem. When you remove a man from the home, who is there to raise the boys? Now, this is nothing against single moms. I'm not here to talk against single moms. They do a lot of great things, and I've seen a lot of good men come out of single moms' homes. But the problem is, only a man can teach a boy how to become a man. So when you have an undisciplined boy who grows up, he's going to be an undisciplined man, and everything is just going to cycle through and reciprocate. And so we've got to be reinfused and take our position back as the leader of our homes, not the dictator, not just I'm here, I go to work, I pay the bills, but to be an active part in your relationship with your wife and your relationship with your kids. Here's the other problem in our culture that I see and in the world today, and that is short-term thinking. And men have it especially. Okay? We're really short-term goal oriented. How can I get the next paycheck? How can I afford my car? How can I buy a house? How can I get a woman? How can I get a wife? We learn all of these things and we're just so forward thinking, and short-term goal, we just see, hey, I can make a bunch of money at this job. So we jump at this job, and 2 months later, you've got the money, but you're miserable where you work. You get the car payment, but then you don't have time to drive because you got to be working all the time to pay off the car. Same thing with the house. You get a girl, you sleep around with her, everything sounds good, and then you still find yourself empty because you didn't take the time to look at the long-term goals. Culture puts a lot of pressure on us to get married and have a family and have a kids, and so we hurry up and we get the job, we graduate, we get a wife, and then we're miserable because we didn't think about the long term. What does it mean to be married? How do I be a husband? How do I be a father? And so these are all areas that we have to be better in and move our thinking from short-term to long-term thinking. And begin thinking of the long-term consequences and not just what is benefiting me. And our culture actually encourages this. All right? I mean, now the way that it is, I do blame guys, but you can't blame guys for this. The world is telling us today, we don't want you in our lives. We just want you to have sex and to get us money and to take us out on dinner. And so we do it. We jump in. We get these short-term goals. We go in. We hit it. And we go, wait a minute. You're telling me that I don't have any responsibility outside of just having fun with you. And then we get to run off. And we never learn how to be men. And we leave this wake of childish behavior behind us. And we never fully grow up because we're undisciplined men. So tonight, I hope to bring discipline back into your life and to help give you some points to help you move forward and grow. The first faith lesson I want us to look at tonight is this. A godly man does not do it on his own. It is in our culture. It is how we've been brought up. It is in our very nature as a man to do it ourselves. Hey, can I help you lift that? Nope, I got it. Let me show you how strong I am, right? That's kind of the bravado we walk around with. And we've got these big egos. We've got these ideas that we can do it on our own, that we can pile the weight of the world on our shoulders and walk through a fire and not be singed. But the problem is when you have that bravado, you end up hurting yourself. You end up wanting to keep up that bravado and that pride and that proudness and approving yourself to everybody so much that you start to push people away. You push them away because you don't want to hear their correction. Because if they're correcting you and you have to admit you're wrong, it deflates your ego. It deflates your pride. And you begin to repeat the same mistakes because you've ignored good advice. And you're unwilling to let people tell you where your blind spots, where your weaknesses, where your problems lie. And we constantly keep falling in the same pit over and over and over again. Now here's the problem. Because of our bravado, because of our strength, because of your cunning, because of your brains, a lot of times we can pull ourselves out of that pit over and over and over again. Mark Atterbury, in his book about Samson, talks about how Samson, through the strength that God has given him, got out of many scrapes. He lived his life on the line, constantly getting into dangerous situations with women, getting into fights with Philistines and picking fights with Philistines, but he was always able to use his strength and his cunning to get out of the problem until he didn't. And a lot of times that's what happens to us. We have this pride, we have this ego. I'm not going to put it down. I'm going to be strong. I'm going to be great. I'm going to be awesome. And then what happens? We fall down and we turn around to look and there's no one there because we've pushed people away. So 2 ways to fix that, or the way that we fix that is by sucking up our pride, putting it behind us, taking responsibility for our actions, identifying our weaknesses and our blind spots, and addressing them to be a more complete man and a better godly man. All right? And there's 2 ways that we can do that. Number 1 is to not ignore good advice. Learn to listen to people. All right. Now, I put a list of people up on the board for you guys to look at. So those of you who are taking notes, you can write it down. There's 3 types of people you should listen to. And I want to preface this by saying, and I got this from Mark Atterbury, you don't have to, listening is different than doing. Does that make sense? Like you can listen to people, but it doesn't mean you have to do everything you want. The first one up there is people who disagree with you. Wait a minute, I don't want to listen to those people. They're nuts. They're wrong. Why would I listen to them? Because you never know when they might say something that's important. No matter how much you disagree with somebody, they probably have a valid point in there somewhere. And it's important for you to find that because not only do you gain common ground, but maybe you can help improve yourself. All right? So learn to listen to them. Doesn't mean you have to do everything they say. We're going to talk about how to discern that here in just a moment. But the next person to talk to is people who love you. People who truly love you and who truly care for you. And this can be tough to figure out sometimes, but you really have to work at it. You have to use discernment that we'll talk about in a moment. And here's the truth. If you've been dating a girl for 3 weeks, she's not the one you listen to. She doesn't truly love you yet. There will come a point when that happens. There will come a point where you can start listening to them. But if she comes in and starts changing all of your way of life, pushing out your best friends, pulling out your parents, you need to listen to other people. Is she loving you? Or is she just trying to get her way with you and change your life and make herself feel better? Samson faced the same thing in chapter 14 of Judges. He saw this Philistine girl and he goes to his parents and he goes, I want that, go get it for me. That's a rough translation, but it's not far off. And his parents come in and they go, well, hold on a minute. Let's talk about this. Like, she's a Philistine. You're supposed to be leading an army against the Philistines. I don't think that's smart. I don't care. She's hot. Go get her for me. And so they did. End of the story. Dude gets married to the girl. He's got all these Philistine men there. He wants to show how awesome he is and how cunning he is. He gives them a riddle. They play dirty. They threaten to kill his wife's family to get the answer to the riddle. She gets the answer to the riddle. He gets upset because he has to pay him this big thing. He leaves her and she goes off and gets married to somebody else. Wasn't even married a week. Don't listen to those people. Learn to listen to people who truly love you. Your parents, your friends that have been there for a while, that have proven that they have your best interests to them. When you stop disregarding their information, or when you stop listening to people who truly care for you, you're in a danger zone. And then the last people to listen to is those who have achieved access before. And in the area you're working. Let me give you an example. In this book, Mark talks about, I think it was him as the pastor, a young man that comes to him and is struggling with his marriage. All right? And he starts telling him all the problems that he has in his marriage. And the pastor asks him, he goes, hey, have you sought anybody else for help? And he goes, yeah. I went to my dad and he's been giving me tips on what to do. And the pastor just stops. And he looks at him. And for most of us, we'd sit there and go, well, yeah, that's what you should do. You should go to your dad. You should ask your dad for help. He's going to be good, right? And then the pastor looks across at him and he goes, your dad's been divorced 4 times, right? And he just let it sit there. And all of a sudden the guy goes, oh, yeah, it's good to go to your dad, but if he hasn't had success in the area you need help with, that might not be the best place to go. So go and talk to somebody who's achieved success before so you can learn how to be successful in that area. The second way that we can put our egos behind us and not do it on our own is to not take things for granted. It's really easy in life to take people, to take God, and to take good things for granted. All right? Sometimes we assume, because we've been able to fight our way through and been able to push our way through the potholes of life, sometimes we assume that the wave of good stuff that's happened to us is not going to go away. That's what happened with Samson. Everything was going good until it wasn't. And so we've got to learn to stop taking things for granted. He took his parents for granted. He took his wife for granted. He did take his wife for granted. She turned on him. He took all these women for granted. He took Delilah for granted. And she turned on him. His parents weren't able there to bail him out. He took them for granted. So many times we take those things for granted. And then when we need them the most, when we've fallen back in that pit, we've severed those relationships and it's hard for them to come back and help us out. The next faith lesson I want us to look at tonight is this. A godly man leads with integrity and discernment. And you guys need to listen faster. I'm only a quarter way through and we've got to pick up the pace. So listen a little bit faster. Anger is a big part of a lot of men's lives. I'm going to raise my hand. Who here struggles with anger? Okay? Yeah. I'm going to say that's probably 99% of us. And here's what happens to us. Oftentimes, we use anger as a tool. We blow our top and we use anger to control people, because when somebody gets angry and loses their mind, what is your first reaction? Whoa, 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 whoa. You start backing off, start trying to do the thing so that it doesn't accentuate and get bigger and worse. And a lot of times as guys, we have success with that. And it brings satisfaction to know you have that kind of power over people. And that's the scary thing about our anger, is it can be successful in accomplishing that goal. All right? Anger is addictive. But the problem is it must be intensified to maintain its effectiveness. And you start off just raising your voice, to getting angry, to stepping up in someone's face, to yelling and moving quickly, to throwing things, to punching holes in walls, to breaking TVs and video game controllers when that noob blows your head off and he shouldn't have even been close, right? And I don't say those things to call each individual of you out, or you may be sitting there going, man, he hit that nail on the head. No, those are all things I've done. If you want to come to my house, I can show you the holes that I've had to learn to repair in my drywall. All right? I can show you the cracked knuckle I have from punching the stud. Okay? Our anger has to be intensified to maintain effectiveness, and that produces collateral damage and it stunts our spiritual growth. Anger should not be used as a tool for us to lead. Jesus' brother James, who wrote the book of James and a couple other books of the Bible, says, your anger can never make things right in God's eyes. I want you to think about that for a second. Your anger can never make things right in God's eyes. Well, it sure feels good. That's the addicting part of it. But no matter what you think, your anger, no matter how righteous you think it may be, cannot make things right in God's eyes. And the problem with anger is this: it leads to obedience and not submission. And most of us may be sitting here and thinking, well, I want people to obey me. If I'm leading a group of people that I'm supervising at a job, or if I'm leading my family, I want obedience. You're correct, but there's a difference between obedience and submission. Obedience is forced. I do it because I'm afraid of you, because you flex your power, and because if I don't, you threaten to fire me. Submission is a willingness of the heart for the person to come and work alongside you and to help you be successful. And as leaders, that is what we should be and what we should do. We should learn to lead with love and servanthood. Just because you're in charge, just because you're in the head of the household, you should sacrifice yourself for those around you. That doesn't mean you're going to dive on a bullet, but maybe for your family it does. But you should come down, you should work, you should help and serve those you supervise and those in your family to help elevate their status and their position so that they want to willingly work for you. Because people will do 1,000 times more work for you if they are submissive than if they are obedient. Because they know you care and they care for you, and you build that relationship. And the best ways to do that are to learn discernment, learn when to use the proper tools of leadership. Because here's the deal. Sometimes anger can be a useful tool, but you can't let it get out of control. You got to keep it in tone. Sometimes you got to use anger to protect those around you and to keep them safe. But you've got to learn discernment. So the first thing is integrity. The second is discernment. What is integrity? Integrity is being a state of whole. It's being complete or undivided, or my favorite, incorruptible. I think incorruptible is a great way to look at integrity. It's the opposite of having a divided heart or being double-minded. It's that old school mentality of a handshake and my word seals the deal. That idea of integrity is lost in our culture. It's become a culture of all about me. I will do what I have to get ahead. I will throw as many people as I need to under the bus as long as I am successful. I don't care about those in my wake. But that is not the way of a godly man. Jesus is the perfect example of that. We saw that in that verse that Greg read. He sacrificed for the church to make them pure, to make them holy. And we are to do the same for not only our wives, but for those that we serve and take care of and oversee. A lot of times, when our anger gets the best of us, we have to attack it and use our integrity to help keep our lid on. You let God become our counselor and work at developing patience with those around us so that we can keep our integrity intact, right? The best way to learn that is through discernment. Discernment is knowing what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. I think that's a good definition. But there's a problem. There's a lot of enemies to discernment. There's the enemy of pride, alcohol, anger, lust, greed, hatred, and impatience. And if we have those festering inside us, or we partake in those things, it makes discernment really hard. Because if I'm proud, I'm going to do what's going to inflate my ego. If I consume alcohol, I no longer have control over my mind and my brain, and I am altered. So how can I discern things properly? If I'm in anger, I've lost control. And I've lost the ability to discern right and wrong, and I'm going to make crazy decisions. If I am full of lust, those desires are going to outweigh everything else, and it's going to become selfish. Greed is the same. Hatred is the same, and impatience. If I'm impatient, I'm going to get frustrated and push people aside to make way for somebody who can do it quicker, better, and faster. And that's no way to be successful. But there's 4 secrets of discernment, and I want to read them to you. It comes from the story. Again, I got this from Mark Atterbury. Most of the sermon is from him, and I wish that we could just sit here and read this whole book together, but we don't have time. He brought up the 4 secrets of discernment as seen in the life of Joseph in Genesis chapter 39, verses 7 through 12. And for those of you who may be unfamiliar, Joseph is the son of Jacob, who would be the father, who is Israel, the father of the nation of Israel. And Joseph is one of his sons. And he gets sold into slavery by his brothers. He goes to Egypt. He becomes the head of one of the top guards in the Egyptian army named Potiphar. And he gets put in charge of the whole household. And we pick up the story in verse 7. And it says this: Now Joseph was well built and a handsome man. After some time, his master's wife longingly looked at Joseph and said, "Come sleep with me, big boy." The big boy was added. But he refused. "Look," he said to his master's wife, "with me here my master does not concern himself with anything in the house, and he put all of the things he owns under my authority. No one in this house is greater than I am. He has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. So how could I do this immense evil? How could I sin against God?" Although she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her. Now one day he went into the house to do some work, and none of the household servants was there. She grabbed him by the garment and said, "Sleep with me, big boy." But leaving his garment in her hand, he escaped and ran outside. He used discernment to get away from that situation. Now, she was evil. She turned on him. She did the wrong thing, and he got him in trouble, but God used it to do greater things. But what we can take from this is the discernment of Joseph. What did he do? The first thing he did is he assessed his surroundings. He looked around at where he was at as the top of Potiphar's house, and he goes, "This is a good place to be. I'm going to stay here. I'm not going to do that. All right? I'm not going to sleep with you. There's no reason to. Why would I mess this job up?" Right? The second thing that he did is he looked within and he used his integrity. He said, "Look, your master has trusted me with everything. He's known that I'm trustworthy, that I have this integrity. Why would I ruin the one thing that I hold most dear to me? How could I do this immense evil?" And he looked at his own integrity and said, "No, I'm better than that. I'm not going to sleep with you." The third thing he did is he looked towards his future. He realized that if he slept with her, it could end his rule and reign there where he was at, and he didn't want to ruin a good thing. So he used his discernment to look around to see all of these things and realize, I'm in a good spot. Why do I want to mess this up? But then lastly, he looked at God and he said, how could I sin against God? She didn't know who God was. I mean, she might have from him, but she didn't have a relationship with God. And yet that was his standard, his moral standing that he put there. He couldn't bear the thought of sinning against God. It's very powerful 4 things that he has done. I mean, let's face it. There's probably a lot of us in this room that would have taken her up on that offer. Because our integrity wasn't intact. Because we had an enemy of discernment in our life. And it would have been real easy to justify and go, well, I'm sure other slaves have done it. I'm sure other people have done it. So why not? It's not a big deal. She's the master of the house. Well, who cares? But he used discernment, kept his integrity intact, and moved forward. And that's what we as godly men have to do. Now the last section. All right. The last section here is a godly man loves his wife. And I want to reiterate again. Yes, I know most of you are not married in here. There's several of us who are. And so this will be helpful to you, but it's going to be helpful to everybody. Because the fact of the matter is, you need to start loving your wife now, even though she's still coming down the road. And the girl you're dating right now is not your wife yet. Not saying she can't be, but she is not your wife yet. So treat her like somebody else's wife so that you can respect your wife when she arrives. That is one of the most important things you can do as a godly man, but it is a trait that is lost in our culture today. Women are pushing to be more independent and be, more by themselves, but yet they are becoming more and more of the things they don't want, objects. They don't want to be objectified. They don't want to be treated like property, but yet they themselves throw themselves out there like property, and we have to learn to respect them enough to know that they are somebody else's wife. Now here's some of the issues that we face as men. There is a ton of subliminal and in-your-face pressure to hurry up, find a wife, and get married. But no one tells you how to handle it. It's all that short-term thinking that we were talking about earlier. No one sits there and goes, well, here's how you do it. Here's how you romance the wife. Here's how you get her. And then once you're married, here's what you do to keep it intact. We just get that pressure. And then there's more than two, but there's two main ways that we react to this pressure. The first one is we love hard. What's that in cultural speak now? Simping? You get simped up, right? You turn into a big old simp. First girl comes to you, man, I've got all this pressure to find the girl, to be there, to be what it is. And you're like, I fall hard. And you're in there and you're like, oh man, whatever you say, I'm going to do it. And you turn into nothing more than a dog on a leash being paraded around by this woman. That's not what biblical relationships are meant to be. The man is to be the head of the household. Now, my grandma used to say, the woman is the neck that turns the head. And that's important because here's what you have to understand. It's a relationship. It's a partnership. And you have to work together. But you have to pull your weight. Going to work, coming home, paying the bills, and sitting down in your chair and flipping the TV is not it. But neither is simping. Neither is moving around and taking care or just being dragged along just because they gave you time. Because here's something else. Just because a woman gives you the time of day doesn't mean that she respects you. And I'm getting ready to hit on that real big, so just hang in there. The second way we react to this pressure that's out there is we just give up. And we just say, well, I'm just going to do things for pleasure. And we begin sleeping around, and we begin making decisions based on not a long-term expectation of finding a genuine wife, but with the idea of what's best for me right now. And that's a problem. Here's the first thing I want to say. A godly man loves his wife. In the Bible, in scriptures, it says husbands are to love your wives. But it never says the wife is to love the husband. But you didn't know that. The husband is to love your wife. Now it does say in verse 33 that we read earlier, right? To sum it all up, husbands love your wives as yourself, but wives respect the husband. Guys, you've got to treat your woman with love to get the respect that you need. Men need respect, women need love. God knew that. He wrote it in the manual. There's a great book out there, I think I have a picture of it, called Love and Respect. Again, just like this book, if you haven't read it, I encourage you to go get it and read it. Love and Respect by, I can't pronounce his last name, Ederich. I call him Eggman. That's probably not the best thing to do. It's a really good book. But it teaches you how to love your wife because it's foreign to us. A lot of times in relationships, when I'm dealing with people, they come in and they go, my wife doesn't respect me. And I look at the wife and she goes, he doesn't love me, so I'm not going to give him respect. And that happens a lot. Because we each need something different. It's not love, love. It's not respect, respect. You need to love your wife, and guess what? She'll respect you. She will respect you, and then you will show her love. You have to love your wife and find a woman who respects you. Love needs to be our number one goal when it comes to life. When it comes to, not life, our wife. You need to love your wife. But here's the problem. Love has been replaced by another 4-letter word. Lust. Lust is probably the number one enemy for men in our lives. Woody Allen, the actor and director and producer, said, "Love is the answer. But while you wait for the answer, sex raises some pretty good questions." I thought that was a pretty good line. You see, lust causes us to ignore our spiritual considerations. I mentioned earlier that Samson got to the point where he asked his parents, and they wanted to give him some feedback, and he goes, "She's hot, I want her, bring her. Make it happen, come on." And a lot of times that's what happens to us. When we revert to lust, we turn to an animal instinct. But sex was not created for man to be an animal, to be animalized. Our culture has created that. Because they don't believe in creation. They believe we evolve. So when it comes to sex, they say, it's an instinct. It's natural. Do it. Enjoy it. It's going to be great. But that's not how sex was created. That's not what sex was created for. Sex for man was designed by God to be different than the animal kingdoms. Man is the only creature that has face-to-face sex in an intimate way. Man and woman, humans, are the only creatures that understand the idea of romance. It's crazy how animalistic our culture has taken sex. Guys, sex is a personal interaction with spiritual ramifications. It is not just to throw out there for anybody. We are not animals. We were created differently with an intended purpose to have a one wife and one husband and become one flesh. We need to learn to make love, not just have sex. And that starts by loving our wife, whether she's in your life now or not. But we need to have a plan of action. Because lust comes in many forms. Sometimes it's not a woman. Sometimes it's a computer, a chat room, a book, a magazine, a movie, a TV show that we watch over and over and over again. And so we have to come up with a plan of action. And I put a plan of action up here for you guys. 4 steps. Again, I got this from Mark Atterbury in this book. I've had these steps represented in other ways, but this is a good one for tonight. The first one is get right. Guys, you got to start focusing on your heart and not your penis. It's that simple. It's a complicated thing to think about, but that's the way you got to go. It starts in the heart. You got to look to God. You got to focus to Him. You got to ask Him to come in and clean everything out and help you to restart. You got to get right. You got to ask for forgiveness. You got to start thinking clearly and turn your lust into love. The change starts on the inside and moves out. The second thing is get away. Cut anything off that makes it easy to break your new plan of purity. Get rid of stuff. And I'm talking drastic. If you got to go back to an old school flip phone, do it. If you've got to take a computer out and leave it at your parents just because you can't trust yourself, do it. Read your Bible, not the internet. Get drastic. It's like this. If a plane was crashing and you had a parachute, it's real easy to grab the parachute, jump out, and live another day, right? But it's a lot harder if there's no parachute. What are you going to do? You got to fight to get that plane working again, or to land the plane, or to bring it in. Well, with lust, I'm telling you, you are on a plane that is about to crash, and it is going to shake up your world. You can't keep a parachute because you'll keep falling back into that same problem over and over and over again because the parachute's too easy. And it's not going to be easy to move past this lust. The next thing is get help. Lust is an addiction. You can hate yourself. You can hate the actions you do. But unless you get somebody that's willing to pull you up, we talked about this at the very beginning, you don't have to do it by yourself. Unless you can get somebody to pull you up, you're going to fall right back into it no matter how much you hate yourself. Because that's what addictions do to us. So get some partners. Not just one, get 7, 15, 24. Be open. You don't have to do this by yourself. Instead of falling into the hole and having to crawl yourself out, how about you have 15 guys keep you from ever falling in the hole? That's the best way to pursue it. The next plan of action is to get busy. Fill the pockets of time that you normally use for lust. Whether it's porn, whether it's sex, whether it's chat rooms, whatever it is. Find things to do. Get a second job. Get a new hobby. Move out of the apartment that you've been in for years where you've had those same interactions over and over and over again. Get drastic. Do what you need to fill up that time. Heck, come serve at the church. We've got tons of stuff that you can help with. But find something to fill that time. Turn your lust back into love and learn to love your wife. Now here's the last thing for tonight. And this is taking longer than I thought, but that's okay. The last thing is intimacy. Guys, we have to understand what intimacy is. Most people look at intimacy and they go, oh, that's the women got that on lockdown. And you're right, they do. But I got news for you. While it may take 2 to build intimacy, the husband is the one who's responsible for intimacy in the relationship. The women need it to thrive. That's why they want to talk to you so much. That's why they keep going, why don't you ever talk to me? Why don't you ever do this? That's why when they get on there, why do you treat me like this? Why do you do that? They need intimacy. All right? And we have to have that proper perspective. And that proper perspective is that you as the man, as the husband, is responsible for that intimacy. It starts in dating and it moves all the way up to marriage. It culminates in an intimate sexual relationship, and then it continues for the rest of the time you have with that woman, growing intimate with her. That's what it is. But it also takes time to build intimacy. It doesn't just happen overnight. And for those of you who are thinking, oh, okay, well, intimacy is just sex, right? No. Intimacy is so much more than sex. Intimacy is knowing the other person better than anybody else. Peeling back the layers to where you can be sitting in a room, you can look across, see your spouse, and have a conversation without saying a word. It's getting to know them that close. Making time for them. Spending time so that you can have these conversations, you can talk, and you can move through it. And here's the last one that I think gets misinterpreted a lot. Sometimes it takes trouble to build intimacy. Sometimes when you're struggling, when you're barely afford the rent on your apartment, when you have to sit down with your wife and you have to look across the table and go, okay, babe, are we going to pay for the car, the phone, the electricity, or the water, or food for us? Those are the things that build intimacy. Those are the things where you cling together and you grow stronger and you learn things about each other that you never knew. But in our culture, in our world today, they say, hey, if that's the case, leave and start over. Obviously, it failed. No, you need to work through those troubled things to draw it together. Because here's the thing about intimacy, and I mentioned this just a few moments ago. What does Ephesians 5:33 say? Love your wives as what? Yourself. Man, we got enough pride. We know how to love ourselves. We know how to build up our ego. We know how to take care of ourselves and defend ourselves in those types of things. We need to defend our wives the same way. We need to take care of our wives and love them as ourselves. That's the command. We need to make sure that everything we would do for us, we would do for them. And you're going to have to defend your wife. I know if somebody got up and started talking down to me, I'm going to get right back in their face. I got in a fight with my brother-in-law. And for those of you who don't know, this was when he was in the Marine Corps and could kill me like a twig. But we got in a fight over our wives, and I wasn't about to back down. I knew I was about to die, but I wasn't going to back down. And sometimes we have to do that for our wives. When somebody talks down to your wife, you better believe you better step up and defend her and keep her safe. But here's the funny thing. It's not always against somebody outside. Sometimes you got to defend your wife against your own mom. She's your priority, not your mom. Husbands to leave his mother and father and cling to his wife. And sometimes you got to defend your wife against your own kids. You can ask my oldest two. The youngest one hasn't quite gotten there, but he's getting close. They start talking back to your wife, you best be getting in their face. I know we said judge your anger, but they need to know that's my wife. She's the most important thing in the world to me. I love her more than I love you. And if you're going to talk to her that way, you're out because she's in. And you got to learn to defend your wife and develop and build that intimacy. Now here's ways to build intimacy real quick. You have to spend quality time with your wife. You have to make time. If you love her, spend time with her. You guys know this. When you stop caring for a girl, you stop answering those text messages. You stop making time for them. Make quality time for them where you can sit down and you can develop that intimate relationship. The next thing you need to do is you need to give her the gift of words. This is a big one. Guys don't like to talk. Women like to talk all the time. Yeah, that's part of intimacy. That's how you get to know them. You got to give them subject matter. There's a comic that Mark used in his book. It's Dilbert. Any of you guys know Dilbert? Or are you guys too young for that? I got a fan over there, a couple guys in the back. Dilbert, it's hilarious. It's funny. But he has this Dilbert comic strip that was in the newspaper. And it's a guy talking to this woman. And the woman says, I love a man who can communicate, but not one who always talks about work or football or sex or cars or their accomplishments. And the man kind of looks at her and he goes, man, if that's the case, that just leaves Greek mythology and you to talk about. And she goes, I really hate Greek mythology. Do you get the point? Who does she want to talk about? Her. Give her time. Learn how her day went. Learn how it's going. I know you don't care. I've been married for 17 years. But I've had to learn to care because it's important. And that's how I grow the intimacy with my wife. You have to learn to give her words. The other night, I went and crawled into bed. I turned off the TV, put my phone down. I started scratching her back, and I asked her how her day was. That was the last thing I had to say. She just took over from there. Let them talk. But listen. We talked about who to listen to earlier, right? Learn to listen to them. The next thing to develop intimacy is protect the dignity and the privacy of your marriage. Okay? This is a big one, and there's two factors that I want to point to. And that is this. Number one, don't be sharing your personal time with your buddies. Keep that between you and your wife. If you walk in public and she's uncomfortable with the way that you hold or treat her or things like that, respect that. Save that time for you. It's a face-to-face, intimate, personal relationship. It's not something to be smeared and spread all over with your friends and things like that. That's your role. She's going to go talk to all her girlfriends about it, but you need to keep it to yourself and respect that. All right? That's what we are asked to do. But here's the other place where this comes into play. Protect the dignity and the privacy of your marriage. Sex and the dignity and the privacy of your marriage is to be after marriage. Keep other women, keep your future wife out of your bed and out of your bedroom now. You need to be working on developing this intimacy long before you ever sleep with them after marriage. It's something that's supposed to happen afterwards. You also need to keep porn out of your bedroom and out of your mind to respect that relationship. Because that's the importance of developing intimacy. How are you going to develop intimacy with somebody when you've got other women and pictures of other women that you don't even know running through your mind all the time? It's impossible. You've got to start working on keeping that clean. If you've made the mistakes, it's there. Work on having that clean heart, asking for forgiveness, building that integrity back up, taking those steps to turn your love into lust. But start today respecting that time. And the last one, and I'm going to run through this really quickly, apologize for how long, is make sure that your wife is the primary source of your emotional support. This is absolutely huge. Anytime you go to somebody for emotional support, there is a bond that is built between the two of you. Okay? Anytime that happens. And so when you do that with your wife, it strengthens that intimacy. She gets to know you more. She loves to help you with those things. You may not want to hear it, but she needs to be that person. Because here's the problem if you don't. If you are constantly, let's start with the easy one. Let's say your emotional support person is your best friend. And you come home, you've had a long, stressful day at work, and your wife has been waiting to see you all day and have a conversation with you and build that intimacy, and you walk in and go, babe, I've just had it. I need to go to the bar with Jimmy and just have a few beers. Or I need to go over to Johnny's house and have a beer and just sit down and relax. You're building intimacy with Johnny and a beer, not your wife. She needs to be that person. The other danger zone is if another female becomes that emotional support person, it's going to create an inappropriate relationship with them because you've created a bond. And sometimes it starts off as innocent. Most work affairs start off as something simple. You're at Starbucks, working the bar, and you look over and one of your coworkers is just stressed out and you can tell there's something wrong. And you go, hey, Darla, are you okay? And she explodes or vomits out all of these things that are happening, and you just comfort her and listen and talk her through. That creates a relief, and it marks you guys because she felt relief when she talked to you. The next day she asks you, you do the same thing. And all of a sudden, slowly but surely, you keep building and building this emotional support between this person, and now you have a relationship with them, whether it's physical or not. It becomes emotional, and many times it becomes physical because that is a person that makes you feel good. That is what that relationship is for. So make sure that your spouse, your wife, is your emotional support. So tonight, I hope you've learned something. I know it was a lot. I know I just unleashed a fire hose on you guys. I tried to cut some out, but I felt these were the important things. To understand that a godly man doesn't do it on his own. A godly man doesn't leads with integrity and discernment, and a godly man loves his wife. But here's something real quick. Did you notice the key phrase at the beginning of all three of those? A godly man. In order to be successful in this journey, you have to be a godly man. You have to have a relationship with God. You have to put your faith in Him. And if you haven't ever trusted Jesus as your Savior, that He died on the cross for you, He paid the penalty for your sins, He rose again to defeat death, then you'll have a real hard time being successful in being a godly man. So tonight, I'm going to give you the opportunity, if you never have, to trust Jesus as your Savior. Let's bow our heads in prayer. As the band is coming up, we're going to extend an invitation. And I'm going to give you the opportunity to trust Jesus as your Lord and Savior for the very first time tonight. And if you've never trusted Him, but you want to start living this life, you can come up, you can talk to me, you can talk to Ben in the back, you can talk to Brandon Gover, and we'd love to share with you. But the other thing that I want to do is I want to open up this stage. I want to open up this stage, and maybe tonight you've been struggling with some of these things, but you want to turn those things around. Tonight, you can come up to this stage, you can kneel down, and you can pray for your future wife, for your future life, and for your journey.